There are moments in your life when you look around and realize you've been building everything except the part of you that actually matters. You've trained your body, sharpened your image, cultivated success until it became another mask you wear in public. Yet something inside you stays strangely untouched, like a locked room in a familiar house. And here's the truth that hits like a blade. All these external upgrades haven't solved the quiet ache you feel when a woman looks at you with polite interest instead of hunger. It's in that small, devastating distinction that your entire illusion shatters. Because deep down, you know you didn't work this hard just to feel invisible in the moments that matter. And this is the part no one warned you about. You can build a strong life and still remain weak inside it. You've been conditioned to believe that attraction runs on a simple formula: money, muscles, confidence, lifestyle. So you've treated life like a checklist, hoping that once all the boxes were filled, desire would finally feel effortless. But desire isn't a reward for effort, it's a reaction to presence. Women don't fall for accomplishments, they fall for the energy you carry when you stop performing. And this is where the real fracture begins. You've been polishing the surface while the foundation stays fragile. You've learned how to look valuable, but not how to feel valuable. And when a woman senses that split inside you, she instinctively pulls back even if she doesn't know why. What she feels is the gap between your image and your essence. Take a moment and imagine the man you admire most, not for what he owns, but for how he moves through the world. He could be sitting in a quiet room, wearing nothing impressive, and still command the energy around him. That's because real value isn't a performance, it's a state. It's the grounded certainty of someone who doesn't need the world to clap before he stands tall. And this is where your transformation begins. Not in the gym, not in your career, not in your wardrobe, but in the invisible field you create every time you interact with another person. Women aren't addicted to perfection, they're addicted to emotional gravity. The question is, are you cultivating gravity or just decoration? Before you move forward, you need to confront something most men spend their entire lives avoiding. The goals you're chasing may not even be yours. If you strip away society's voice, your friends' opinions, the online noise telling you what a high-value man should be, what would actually remain? Who would you be if no one were watching? This is the doorway most men never walk through, because it requires a level of honesty that burns. But if you're still here, reading, it means you're not running from the fire, you're moving toward it. And that's the first sign you're ready for a different kind of life. Stay here. This is where men stop pretending and start awakening. There's a law of attraction no one teaches you, because it can't be measured, posted, or sold. Perceived value doesn't come from what you have. It comes from how you inhabit yourself. People call it sexual market value, but that phrase makes most men chase numbers, not truth. They obsess over height, income, physique, aesthetics, expecting women to respond like machines. But women don't fall for statistics. They fall for the internal rhythm of a man who isn't swayed by the world. Sexual value isn't a scoreboard, it's an aura. It's the invisible signal you radiate when nothing external can shake your center. And this is the part that stings. A man with fewer advantages but a stronger inner core will outshine you without trying. Not because he's better, but because he's less fragmented. You're not losing to other men. You're losing to your own emotional instability. Picture yourself in a room with other men. Some are richer, some are better looking, some speak louder. None of that decides who rises and who sinks. The moment tension enters the room, a joke at someone's expense, an unexpected silence, a subtle power shift, women instantly sense which man's internal world remains untouched. They're not consciously choosing, they're responding to the atmosphere you generate. A man who stays grounded under tension automatically ranks higher in their subconscious. They feel it in their bodies, not their minds. This one doesn't crumble, this one doesn't chase, this one doesn't need me. And here's the paradox you've never been told. The less you require her approval, the more intensely she feels drawn to you. It's not arrogance, it's emotional sovereignty. This is why competing for approval always backfires. The moment you adjust your voice, posture, humour, or decisions to impress her, you slip beneath her in the internal hierarchy she doesn't even realise she's constructing. She might still like you, but she won't crave you. Because craving comes from mystery, not predictability. It comes from sensing a man who moves with his own weather system, who isn't emotionally scripted by her reactions. When you overinvest, over-explain, or over-pursue, what you're really communicating is, my value depends on your response. And nothing kills attraction faster than that confession. Women don't want to hold emotional power over you. They want to feel the power of your emotional depth. But they can only feel it if you're rooted in something stronger than their opinion. If she feels you bending, she stops feeling you entirely. Now let's talk about pre-selection, the invisible multiplier most men misunderstand. They think it's about flaunting attention, proving desirability, or bragging about options. But that's not pre-selection, that's theatre, and women have an instinctive radar for performance. Real pre-selection is silent. It lives in the calm presence of a man who clearly has options but doesn't chase any of them. He doesn't rush to reply. He doesn't panic at distance. He doesn't treat intimacy as a scarce resource. He moves like someone whose emotional life doesn't begin and end with female validation. That's the kind of man women obsess over, not because he withholds, but because he doesn't cling. You cannot fake abundance. You either live it or you leak, and she always feels the leak. Women don't evaluate you the way you evaluate yourself. They're not tallying your resume or comparing your features like items on a shelf. They're reading something far more primitive, your energetic ranking. Without even realizing it, they place every man they meet into one of two internal categories: above me or below me. Above doesn't mean superior, it means emotionally self-contained. Below doesn't mean inferior, it means emotionally dependent. And here's the truth you wish someone had told you earlier. The moment she senses you need her validation, you've already placed yourself beneath her. She'll still be polite, still be friendly, maybe even affectionate, but the fire will never ignite. Desire doesn't grow where a woman feels responsible for your confidence. You can test this in your own life. Think back to the moments when a woman's interest faded. It wasn't because your achievements were lacking. It wasn't because of your looks. It wasn't because you said something wrong. Her attraction died the second she felt you adjusting yourself to win her approval. That subtle emotional bending, the softening of boundaries, the eagerness, the anxiety beneath your compliments, is what pushed her away. Women aren't repelled by kindness. They're repelled by self-abandonment. A man who stays rooted in himself, even while showing interest, feels like a presence. A man who molds himself to please feels like a shadow. And nobody falls in love with a shadow. She doesn't need you to be perfect. She needs you to be anchored. One of the most misunderstood psychological triggers in attraction is pre-selection. Men think pre-selection means bragging about attention, flirting in front of her, or showcasing desirability like a trophy. All of that is noise, insecure posturing disguised as confidence. Real pre-selection is the absence of desperation. It's the way your energy stays the same whether she texts back or not. It's the way you don't grasp for reassurance. It's the way you don't shrink when she pulls away or overheat when she comes close. The man who has options isn't the one who loudly declares them. He's the one whose behaviour doesn't collapse without immediate gratification. Women feel that contrast in their bones. It's what turns curiosity into obsession. Not because you're playing games, but because you're not afraid to lose her. And here's the shift that separates emotionally powerful men from the rest. They understand that women feel authenticity before intention. You cannot fake emotional abundance. You cannot pretend not to care when your entire nervous system is begging for attention. You cannot disguise insecurity as calmness. She will sense the tremor beneath the surface. But a man who lives from his own center radiates a different texture. His presence is steady. His boundaries are natural, not forced. His attention is a gift, not a hunger. That kind of man activates something ancient in a woman, not just attraction, but instinctual trust. He becomes the emotional north she orients herself around. And once she feels that, walking away from him stops feeling like a choice and starts feeling like a loss. True preselection isn't loud. It isn't theatrical. It isn't the exaggerated flirting, the curated photos, or the performative swagger men use when they're terrified of being overlooked. Real preselection is the calm energy of a man who isn't starving. You can hear it in his silence, see it in his pace, feel it in the way he never rushes toward or away from anything. He moves through life like someone whose emotional world has gravity, not desperation. Women don't obsess because he flaunts his desirability. They obsess because his attention feels rare, unforced, and free of need. And here's the twist. The more quietly abundant you are, the more loudly she feels the pull. She becomes curious about the women who didn't get him, the women who did, and the women he could have chosen but didn't. Curiosity becomes fascination. Fascination becomes attachment. What most men never grasp is that obsession doesn't grow from external value. It grows from internal stability. External value is a photograph, static, measurable, easy to imitate. Internal value is a presence, fluid, felt, impossible to manufacture. Money, aesthetics, and status can make you noticeable, but only inner calm makes you unforgettable. A man who remains steady when life gets loud creates a magnetic contrast in a chaotic world. Women unconsciously test for this consistency, not because they're manipulative, but because they're wired to feel the truth beneath your surface. When you overreact, over-pursue, or emotionally wobble at the slightest uncertainty, she reads you as fragile. But when you stay rooted, even in silence, she sees something far rarer. A man who doesn't shatter when reality changes. Obsession begins when she realizes she cannot destabilize you. This understanding forms the backbone of emotional attraction. Women trust what they cannot easily shake. Men think women want excitement, intensity, and unpredictability. What they actually crave is polarity, her emotional fluidity meeting your emotional groundedness. If she's anxious and you become anxious, the polarity collapses. But if she's swirling inside her feelings and you remain anchored, she feels safe enough to unfold. That unfolding is the true birthplace of obsession. Women attach not to men who mirror their emotions, but to men who can hold them without drowning. This doesn't mean being emotionless. It means being sovereign. Your inner world isn't dictated by her mood, and her affection isn't the oxygen you breathe. That's when she stops evaluating you and starts surrendering to the way you make her feel. You're no longer a man in her life. You become the atmosphere she absorbs. But there's a deeper layer most men ignore: authenticity. You cannot invent inner abundance by imitating behaviors on YouTube or mimicking the mannerisms of men you admire. Women read emotional incongruence faster than you read literal language. If your calmness is an act, she'll sense the tremor beneath it. If your boundaries are rehearsed, she'll feel the tension behind them. Real inner value comes from doing the work nobody sees, confronting your insecurities, facing the parts of you you've denied, and learning to sit with your own silence without panicking. When you build yourself from the inside, your presence stops being a costume and becomes a force, and once she experiences that force, something irreversible happens inside her. She stops wondering whether she wants you, and starts fearing the moment she might lose you. Nothing collapses attraction faster than dependence. You can hide it behind nice words, behind generosity, behind effort, but she feels it the moment your emotional state starts orbiting her attention. When her reply time alters your confidence, when her tone determines your mood, when her approval becomes the scoreboard of your worth, something inside her quietly shuts down. Not because she wants to hurt you, but because she can't trust the weight of a man who leans on her to stay upright. A woman can love you, desire you, admire you, but she will never be addicted to a man whose self-worth sits in her hands like fragile glass. People don't crave what they control. They crave what they can't fully predict or contain. That's the paradox you must learn to embody. Men who generate deep psychological attachment operate from a completely different center. They don't spike emotionally when validated, and they don't crumble when criticized. Their reactions are slow, intentional, anchored. When you meet this kind of man, you feel something ancient, a steadiness that exists regardless of environment. Women feel it instantly too. It's not arrogance, it's emotional independence. A man like this doesn't beg for reassurance because he doesn't outsource his identity. His confidence isn't a castle built on compliments, but a mountain carved from self-respect. And this is why women cling to him even when they don't understand why. You're not competing with other men. You're competing with the version of you who keeps giving his power away. Presence is the hidden currency of attraction, and almost no one has it. Most men live in mental time travel, replaying old rejections, anticipating future outcomes, calculating strategies, crafting the right persona. They're in the room physically, but emotionally they're trapped in their own heads. Women feel this disconnection immediately. The empty stare, the rushed answers, the subtle tension in your body. But when a man is truly here, something shifts in the atmosphere. His gaze isn't searching, it's witnessing. His attention isn't a spotlight, it's a grounding field. He listens not to respond, but to receive. For a woman whose nervous system is used to chaos, this level of presence feels intoxicating, a relief she didn't know she needed. Presence doesn't just attract her, it regulates her. But here is the uncomfortable truth. You cannot become present without facing the demons you've been avoiding. The noise in your mind isn't random, it's unprocessed fear, unresolved rejection, unfinished stories. Men avoid silence because silence exposes them. Yet silence is exactly where inner power is forged. When you learn to sit with yourself without distraction, without validation, without performance, you start reclaiming the parts of you you've neglected. That's when your presence changes from a technique to a frequency. A woman can feel that instantly. The difference between a man pretending to be centered and a man who has built his center. And once she feels that, she doesn't just want you near, she needs your presence like oxygen. When you finally learn to bring real presence into your interactions, you stop performing and start being. And that shift is seismic. A present man doesn't chase outcomes, he experiences moments. He doesn't ask himself, what should I say next? But, what is she actually expressing beneath her words? His awareness isn't a spotlight that seeks validation, it's a calm room she can step into. Women instinctively move toward this kind of energy because it feels like safety without submission, intimacy without pressure. A present man becomes a shelter in a world full of noise. And here's the hook most men miss. You don't attract women by making them feel impressed. You attract them by making them feel seen. But you can only see her deeply when you no longer fear being seen yourself. To reach this level of groundedness, you must confront a bitter truth. Most of your desires were handed to you, not chosen by you. The six-pack, the luxury car, the financial milestones. They've become symbols of worth because the world told you to worship them. You chased these goals believing they'd make you magnetic, valuable, loved. But ask yourself with brutal honesty, who told you these things mattered? Who programmed your hunger? Most men never examine the roots of their ambition, so they live like puppets clinging to borrowed dreams. But the men women become obsessed with, truly obsessed, are the ones who have broken the spell. These men don't chase identity, they choose identity. Their lives reflect internal alignment, not external pressure. And this authenticity has a gravitational pull that cannot be faked. Women feel authenticity as quickly as they feel deception. A man who lives according to his own values, who follows his own path even when it's unpopular, carries a different energetic density. You can sense it in his voice, his posture, his decisions. He doesn't move to be admired. He moves because it resonates with his inner truth. This is the kind of man who becomes addictive, not because he's perfect or untouchable, but because he's real in a world that punishes realness. A woman might not consciously articulate this, but her nervous system responds instantly. She feels grounded in his presence because he's not split between who he is and who he pretends to be. Once a woman experiences a man whose actions come from truth instead of insecurity, every other man feels painfully hollow. This is where the deeper transformation begins, reclaiming confidence not through achievement but through self-acceptance. Most men chase success because they secretly hate themselves. They build muscles to hide insecurity, chase money to silence shame, pursue women to avoid loneliness. But these strategies turn confidence into a fragile mask. If your validation comes from what you do, it can be taken from you. If your worth comes from who you are, it cannot. Real confidence is created when you stop running from your imperfections and begin integrating them. When you stop treating yourself like a problem and start treating yourself like a person. When your value no longer depends on applause. And here's the paradox. The moment you stop chasing confidence, you become the kind of man who doesn't lose it, even when everything else falls apart. Most men spend their entire lives chasing achievements, thinking they're chasing confidence. They grind for status, for money, for recognition, believing these trophies will finally silence the voice inside that whispers, "You're not enough." But external success is a slippery foundation. One wrong move, one financial setback, one moment of rejection, and the entire identity crumbles. That's because the confidence built on accomplishments is conditional. It survives only when life behaves. The men who create real obsession in women understand a different truth. Confidence isn't earned, it's claimed. Not by proving something to others, but by ending the war against yourself. When you stop treating your flaws as crimes and your insecurities as weaknesses, you begin to build a kind of confidence that can't be taken away. And that inner solidity is what women feel long before they feel attraction. Nowhere is this dynamic more visible than in how men relate to sex. Most men make sex the goal, the reward, the proof that they've succeeded. But the moment sex becomes your measure of worth, you hand women all the power. You become reactive, eager, anxious, emotionally dependent on access to their bodies. You chase the high of being desired, unaware that this chase exposes your emptiness. Women can sense when your pursuit is rooted in hunger instead of connection. They can feel when you want them not for who they are, but for what their acceptance says about you. That's why obsession never grows from sexual desperation. It grows from sexual sovereignty. the energy of a man who enjoys intimacy but doesn't need it to validate his identity. The man who is not ruled by desire becomes the man women desire most. This is why the rarest and most attractive form of sexual power is the ability to say no, not as a manipulation, not as a strategy, but as a natural extension of your standards. When you can reject an opportunity that doesn't align with you, when you can slow down even when she's ready to rush, when you can choose connection over conquest, you communicate something few men ever embody. Emotional abundance. You're not starving, you're not chasing, you're not trying to fill a void, and this controlled fire is intoxicating. Women are used to men who fold at the smallest sign of affection. They're not used to men who pause, who choose, who remain centered. A man who isn't hypnotized by the promise of pleasure radiates a different kind of danger, the kind that makes her wonder, what does he know about himself that others don't? That question is the beginning of obsession. At the core of all this lies stoic masculinity, not the cold, emotionless caricature people mock, but the true form, grounded emotion, restrained power, depth without volatility. Stoic men feel deeply, but they choose their responses. They don't collapse when tested. They don't explode when provoked. They don't fracture under uncertainty. They hold their center like a tree holds its roots in a storm, and women are instinctively drawn to this steadiness, not because they want someone to dominate them, but because they want someone who cannot be destabilized by their storms. This polarity, her emotional flow meeting your emotional stillness, is the ancient blueprint of attraction. The moment she realizes her chaos cannot shake you, something in her shifts. She stops comparing you to other men and starts comparing other men to you. When sex stops being your finish line and becomes just one expression of connection, something profound shifts inside you. You no longer chase intimacy to fill an emptiness. You no longer treat desire like a currency that determines your value. Instead, you move with the quiet certainty of someone who chooses, not someone who begs. A man like this is dangerous, not because he manipulates, but because he is unshakably free. Women feel that freedom immediately. They feel the difference between a man who wants them and a man who needs them. One is attractive, the other is suffocating. A man who doesn't collapse under temptation, who can walk away from pleasure that doesn't align with him, becomes unforgettable. You stop being a participant in her life and start becoming the standard her body remembers. At the heart of male presence lies something ancient, true stoicism, not the rigid, emotionless shell that insecure men imitate, but the grounded strength that comes from self-mastery. A stoic man doesn't deny emotion, he channels it. He feels the storm without becoming the storm. He listens without defensiveness, speaks without urgency, and remains centered even when she tests him, doubts him, or pulls away. This steadiness doesn't make you distant, it makes you magnetic. Women trust a man who cannot be derailed by their changing moods, because it means his identity is rooted in something deeper than attention. It means he's not living reactively, but intentionally. And this is where the psychological lock forms. Once she realizes you don't need her to stay centered, she becomes the one who clings to your center. But to embody this kind of presence, you must confront the shadows you've avoided, the insecurities you hid behind achievement, the fears you masked with charm, the neediness you disguised as affection. You must sit with yourself in silence long enough to hear the truth beneath the noise. Healing isn't glamorous, it's brutal. It requires you to dismantle the false selves you built to survive. But when you do, something remarkable happens. Your presence stops feeling forced, your boundaries stop sounding rehearsed, your calmness stops being a mask. You become internally coherent, aligned, authentic, whole. And that is the kind of man who alters a woman's nervous system. She doesn't just want you, she feels safe collapsing into the space your presence creates. In the end, the ultimate secret to creating female addiction is neither technique nor strategy. It's self-possession. Become a man who is emotionally complete within himself, a man who doesn't chase validation, who doesn't negotiate his worth, who doesn't crumble at rejection. Become the man who chooses his own path, who stands firmly in his truth, who speaks from his center instead of his insecurity. When you reach this level, something paradoxical happens. You stop needing anyone to choose you, and that is precisely when people begin to chase you. Women sense the rarity of a man who knows his value without asking for confirmation. They feel the gravity of your inner peace. They become addicted not to what you give them, but to who you are. Subscribe if you're ready to stop begging for validation and start becoming the man you would actually admire.